Welcome to Football Unspoken, the home of unique football takes. We've got a transfer episode for you today as we're going towards the opening of the transfer market. But before we jump into it, I have a trivia question for you. Can you tell me, in the last season, how many of the Premier League transfers were free transfers? What percentage?
I know since COVID, it's increased quite a lot. Because I think before that, it was not unheard of, but fairly irregular for it to be a free transfer, for a free transfer to occur. Where now, I'm going to go 40% of transfers are now free transfers in the Premier League.
It's not bad. It's not bad. It was about 31% is what I've found out to be. So you are correct. There's been a jump of about 10% since COVID and free transfers going upwards. Do you see that the current state of the transfer market is unsustainable and therefore we'll see even more free transfers in the future?
That's a great question. I definitely think that the transfer market currently is unsustainable between the numbers and the actual transfers along with the wages. And because of that, you've seen teams they're trying to get around that. You can't get around spending money, but we've seen Chelsea, for example, dishing out 8-year contracts. And, the explanation there is if you spend 160 million over an 8-year contract, it only costs the club 20 million a year, basically. So they've tried to get around it by doing things like that. The fact that a club of Chelsea's size is trying to do tricks like that to get around transfer fees, and that indicates that even until the bigger teams are struggling, and we saw a few years ago with the European Super League, the main motivation behind that was a sustainable source of extra income for the really big teams, Barca, Real Madrid, Juve, because they're even struggling to sort of meet, balance the books and all of that. So from that perspective, I think it's unsustainable. And then with regards to the question of more free transfers, if you're a player, then it's in your interest to wind down your contract, because then you, at the end of it, you go, well, you were prepared to spend 50 million on me. Why don't you just give me the 50 million? I'll cover it up. Or give me 40 million. You can save the 10, but give me an extra 40 million. I know what you're going to give me as my wages anyway. So you start incentivizing players to run down their contract. But I remember in the past, as soon as a player got to his last year, an example of this actually being Van Persie leading for Manchester United from Arsenal, as soon as the player got to his last year, you sold him because you weren't prepared as a club to lose the player for nothing if you'd bought the player. Maybe if you got him on a free transfer or he came from the youth academy, you're willing to. But if you've bought the player, you're not willing to let them go for free, so you sell them. In Arsenal's case, Van Persie went for 24 million. I mean, for the top striker in the league, we had a different episode where we talked about a 20-goal a season Premier League striker, how much that's worth. Him going to Manchester United, winning them the title base the next year for 24 million, it's ridiculous. So I'm so torn with it, just saying I think it's going to carry on increasing or not, because I think players will try to make that happen, but the clubs won't.
Yeah, you've been a bit of a pest to me, so with the taking my player power conversation. But I'll start off with, so I think the big thing is, realistically, it's unsustainable. It's been unsustainable since Paul Pogba. He went for silly money initially, and then you got Neymar going for world record 200 million, and then you got all these players going for just bigger and bigger money. And the problem you have is once you start setting players up to be worth an entire team, you start really you're going to go one of two ways. You're going to go the Mad City way, where you kind of dominate the league, but have you done it legally? We don't know yet. We're still got to find out if they've done that legally. Or you go the Barcelona way, where you're trying to keep up, and then you end up losing the greatest player, probably of all time, on a free, because you can't sustain his wages. And you can't even sustain a wage where he was happy to take as big a cut as he was allowed to take, and you still couldn't pay him that much. And I think that's where it becomes really unsustainable, when these big clubs start getting into these situations where they can't afford to keep shifting out. I mean, you can't, even with their 8-year loophole, Chelsea can't afford to spend another 300 million in the transfer window this year. They have to sell. And then you also end up in the situation where if I'm a team and I need to look to buy, I'm probably going to go to Chelsea. Cool. You want to sell me Conor Gallagher? 60 million. I'm not paying 60 million for Conor Gallagher. I'll give you 30. and they have to sell him. At some point, they have to sell him. And whether or not someone else comes in and pays the 60, it doesn't matter to me because I could potentially get him for half the price you want. And you see it at Nottingham Forest, where they had to sell Brendan Johnson. And then this year, they're probably going to have to sell Morgan Gibbs-White or Callum Hudson-Odoi. They will have to get rid of one of them. And you could probably get one of those players for 40 million, which is easy money in today's football. So I think that's where the unsustainability comes in.
I wonder if the direction of football in general, I think there's a lot of football purists who are about to get very angry with me. But, in the last few years, there's been certain innovations. For example, your top teams have started bringing in set-piece coaches, for example, and that's been a big, almost innovation to really focus in on that. I wonder if the next one's an off-field innovation in the way of having more economists around your football club. And I know that must make people so angry for even suggesting such a thing. But I'm just thinking, like what you're talking about is managing your transfers, managing your assets as the best as possible, like chess pieces almost, to ensure your club's not only healthy, but you're getting the maximum value for the transfers you're selling and you're not overpaying for certain players. You look at, when Liverpool were winning the league and when Man United were winning the league, they were so good at getting players for cheap and selling their players for big prices. What was the name of that Lovren from Liverpool? They sold him to Russia for something stupid, like 35 million, and he was over 30 years old. He was useless at Liverpool, but he went for big money, and then they would be buying players like Salah for peanuts. If you think how good Salah is. I remember at United, when Ferguson was still there, they bought Antonio Valencia, who was a great player for them, played for like 10 seasons, was captain even towards the end. I think they got him for like 18 million. I know that's over 10 seasons ago now. My point was, when you're the top clubs, Man City don't really overpay for players. Maybe you could say Grealish, maybe. But the rest, I can't think of them overpaying for players. And when they sell, they generally get pretty good value, I would say, for the players that they sell. So that's a hallmark for me of a top team as well, how they manage their transfers.
I agree with you in one way, in the fact that it is a hallmark of a good team to manage their transfer as well. But we did speak about this a little while ago in a different episode, about whether transfers are lucky or not, how much luck goes into it. And I think that's where you're going to run into a problem with trying to get an economist in. I don't disagree that you want to make sure you're getting the best out of them, but realistically, every transfer is a bit risky. It could be like you could buy Lionel Messi, but at the end of the day, he could break his leg, and it's over, it's done for, kind of thing. So every transfer at the end of the day is a bit lucky, and I think that's where you could potentially run into a problem. And then the other side, you look at Man City. Yeah, sure, they've done well in their transfer market, 100%. But at the same time, there's still those charges over their head in the way that means that how lucky did they get if they've broken the rules to get those players? Plus, there's currently a contention with, I can't remember who they're buying, but they're buying from like one of their subsidiaries, or another club owned by a similar, and they're not sure if it's market value. You're not sure if they're paying market value, so they're going to arbitration over that.
Maybe Arsene Wenger managed in the wrong decade because he's got a master's degree in economics, so he must have missed out by a couple of years.
Well, that's all they. You say this, but you got Thierry Henry for not a lot of money.
Patrick Vieira as well.
Patrick Vieira. They had some great players that came through, and he did a fantastic job in making sure that. And you got to remember, when he was getting an ambassador with the Wenger out for continuously getting fourth, he would work on an absolute shoestring budget when you compare him to Man United and Chelsea at that particular time as well. Like, they were, under Roman Abramovich, they had ridiculous money. So
you should actually go take a look at the squad or the squads over sort of multiple seasons that Arsene Wenger managed, and seeing the caliber of player he was getting to come forth in the Premier League every year. You look at some of those starting 11s and you're thinking that those squads wouldn't even make 10th in the Premier League now. And so he was working miracles with spending minimal money for a number of years and still achieving Champions League football year in, year out.
But they did have Lord Bettner. So I want to go back to a big point that you made earlier about player power, because at the moment, the thing that got me going on the free transfer was Newcastle are going to get 2 free transfers in potentially. Lloyd Kelly and Tosin. I can't remember his surname from Fulham, but they're two centre backs. And that's going to be huge for their squad depth. Absolutely massive. And there's not understanding that, like, free transfer is not free because you still have to pay agent fees and signing bonus and all that kind of stuff. But it's not as much money as you'd spend just buying the player outright. And then you look at other players like Kylian Mbappe is probably the biggest example at the moment of he's going to Real Madrid for free. That's what's going to happen. And PSG have lost out massively there simply on player power. They've tried to offer him the world. They're basically given him Paris on a lanyard, to be honest. And he's gone, no, I'm not interested. And what are you meant to do as a football team when you've got a player on a pedestal and he just goes, no, I'm not interested. Every other club in the world is going to look at that and go, well, cool, I'll just wait. I'll wait the extra season. It's not the end of the world. He's still 25. Like, I'm still going to get 7 seasons of greatness out of him. And I think that was what I was going to ask you, which is basically how much of an impact is player power going to have going forward in the transfer market with these big players who can go for, there's so many £100 million players. In Newcastle, you got Guimaraes and Isak. You probably got Saka at Arsenal, probably a couple more. You got Phil Foden, definitely. But you can't buy every player for 100 million. So surely these players at some point have to go, I just don't want to be here anymore.
I wonder if the direction of squads is maybe there's being a resurgence of young players in Premier League squads, because if you have a Gallagher or a Lewis Miley or someone like that in your squad and he's worth 40 million, that's a free 40 million of asset you have. So you talked about earlier, Chelsea will try and sell Gallagher because if they get 60 million for him, that's a free 60 million plus to their numbers to help them against FFP. Same with another Arsenal would want to sell Saka, but just hypothetically, it allows you to spend a lot more money in other places of your squad because you're covered by sort of youth academy players. So I actually think there might be in the next 5-10 years kind of a refocusing from top Premier League teams to try and get more youth players. You know who's done that quite well actually already is Real Madrid. If you look at how many young Brazilians they've been bringing in, the age they brought Vinicius in, the age they brought Rodrigo in, these kind of players, they've been bringing them in really young from Brazil. And I think part of that is the fact that they can play for longer, which is useful as well. But if you bring them in really young, they come from like an 18 or younger, then when you resell them, the fee, it's basically a huge asset on the books. It allows you to balance your squad value a lot easier than when you're spending 100 million on these 25-year-olds and older.
Yeah, I do agree. I think the sad way the football's going is just the way we're having this conversation is you're no longer looking at the homegrown hero. You're kind of looking at the homegrown asset, as you put it, which is it's a sad way the football's going. But yeah, it's something, especially as a Newcastle fan, I look at and the situation we're in. We're not in dire straits, but if we want to really invest and improve our team, we probably have to sell Sean Longstaff, and we can't get 20 million for him. We need to get 40. That's where you're at. And you look at it, it's like, I love Sean Longstaff. I'm probably one of the few Newcastle fans who do at this point in time. But I love him. I love the fact that he comes out, he plays, and he's a Newcastle boy through and through, and it's fantastic to watch. But if you get a £40 million offer for him, not saying we will, not saying he's worth it, but if we get that, you have to take it. You have to bite the hand off. The last point I wanted to kind of say though is based on around player power. Is do you think player power is going to continue to grow, or do you think clubs will eventually get a handle on this? Because I do look at it and I think there's probably a lack of really strong-willed managers at the moment, and I do think that some clubs are going to have to get a handle on it before you start losing 3 or 4 £100 million assets through free transfers. And so from my side, I think player power has to diminish if clubs want to get a handle on their stuff. And I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think player power is only going to grow for 2 reasons. They're kind of interlinked in a way, but brands, like personal brands and influencer marketing, has become so big in the world, not even just in football, but David Beckham and then Ronaldo really paved the way for influencer marketing in football. And I think all the players now are trying to get on board with that because it's just worth so much money to them. It's also, you know what, it also protects them after their career has ended. You look at how a lot of players are still brands after retiring, or they've built businesses from those brand deals. Then when they retire, you know, like Messi going to the MLS, he's going to have an MLS team for super cheap because of that deal. Now that's a unique deal, but my point is those kind of opportunities exist. So that relies on the player, you know, say doing what's best for him and not really listening to the manager or whatever. And then the second thing is to do with agent power, which is something we've discussed indirectly today, but agent power has got huge in the last 5 years. And the agents, I think, don't have the interests of the clubs, they have the interests of the player. And they're always whispering in the other player's ears saying, you know, just get a transfer to here, or just hold out, you'll get more money. And I think that is a problem as well, is the agents are now redirecting players' minds towards those free transfers, those brand deals, that kind of thing, away from the football. And I think that's part of the problem. So I think, to answer your question, player power is only going to grow more and more.
Yeah, that's fair. I did think about agents, and we haven't spoken enough about them, I think, today. Again, that could probably be a separate podcast of just the kind of environment that big agents have created in football. But it's been interesting hearing what you've had to say. I don't think we necessarily agree on the direction of player power, but I think we do agree that the transfer market is kind of unsustainable, and there definitely needs to be some kind of change for the future of football. But I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Leave your comments about player power and what you think and where you think the transfer market's going to go from here. And until next time, please hit that like and subscribe button. This has been Football Unspoken.